Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're going to talk about solving equations using the zero product property. So, what is the zero product property? The zero product property states that if A times B is equal to zero, that means either A is equal to zero or B is equal to zero or both, right? It's the inclusive or in this case. And just in general in mathematics, it's the inclusive or as well. So, what does that mean in the context of these quadratic equations that we're asked to solve, like x minus 2 times x plus 3 is equal to 0? How can we know what the possibility or possibilities are for x? Well, we can look at x minus 2 as a and x plus 3 as b and say, well, we know that if we're multiplying two things together, a and b, if one of those things is 0, then the entire thing is 0. And that would make this equation true, right? Because the equation says that x minus 2 times x plus 3 is equal to 0. And so therefore, what would it take for x minus 2 to be 0? Well, if x was equal to 2, then that would be the case, right? So x equals 2 is a solution here. And if we were to plug in x equals 2, in this first bracket, we would get 2 minus 2, which is just 0. In the second bracket, we would get 2 plus 3, which is 5. And 0 times 5 is 0. We actually don't really care what b is in this case, because as long as either a is 0 or b is 0, then we're good to go. And so as soon as we know that a is 0, we actually really don't care what b is. It doesn't matter to me if b is 5, which it is, or if b is 10 or 20 or 5 million, because 0 times anything is 0. And likewise, what would it take for b to be equal to 0? Well, for that to happen, x would have to be negative 3. If x is negative 3, then we would have negative 3 plus 3 for b, and that's going to give us 0. And then for a, we would have negative 5. Although, again, it doesn't matter in this case what we have for a. We really only care that we are multiplying some number a by 0, and so therefore 0 is the answer that we get, which would make the equation true. Let's do a couple of more examples. Here we have x minus 4 times x plus 8. Well, we know that if x was equal to 4, then the first bracket would end up being 0. So we'd have 0 times something, which as we know is 0. So that would be a solution. Or if x was equal to negative 8, then the term in the second brackets, this would be 0. And so again, it would be 0 times some other number, which would give us 0. For example C, we have x plus 5 squared is equal to 0. Now, in this case, there's actually only one answer, which is that x must be equal to negative 5. Because if we have negative 5 for x, then we end up with 0 squared equals 0. And as we know, that is true, right? And in this case, since we're just multiplying the same thing by itself, right, we're doing x plus 5 times x plus 5, there's not really a second answer here. What about for D, though? For D, we have three different things we're multiplying, and I will mention that this does work if we have three things as well, right? 0 times any two other numbers is still going to just be 0. So for this example, the answer is x could equal to negative 3 is a solution. X equals 1 is a solution. That would make the middle term 0. And then we would have x equals negative 2, as that would make what's in the last brackets equal to 0. Okay, what about these more complex ones? Right? It might not be obvious to us, how can we make 2x minus 5 equal to 0? Or maybe it is obvious to you. Maybe you do know, and if so, that's great. But if not, here's what you can do. We can do a couple more steps to try to solve. We can say, well, what value would make it so that 2x minus 5 was equal to 0? Well, if 2x minus 5 is equal to 0, that would mean that 2x is equal to 5 if we add 5 to both sides. And then if we divide both sides by 2, we get that x is equal to 5 over 2. So therefore, if x is equal to 5 over 2, that is the equivalent of saying that 2x minus 5 is equal to 0, which would be a solution here. Because again, then we'd have 0 times something else, whatever this is, which is always going to just be 0, as 0 times anything is 0. Okay, now what about the next solution? If 3x plus 6 is equal to 0, then that makes the whole product 0 as well, right? So let's try that. 3x plus 6 is equal to 0. So that means 3x is equal to negative 6, which means that x is equal to negative 2. So therefore, these two numbers are the solutions. All right, and let's do one more example with f. So for this to be true, either a has to be 0, right? Let's let this be a. Either a has to be 0 or b has to be 0. So let's set a to 0. 7x minus 14 is equal to 0. And then we're going to solve for x. So let's add 14 to both sides to get 7x equals 14. Then we're going to divide both sides by 7 to get x equals 2. So if x equals 2, that makes a 0, which makes the equation true. Then for the second one, we have 2x plus 1. Let's set 2x plus 1 equal to 0. Then I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides to get 2x equals negative 1. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 2 to get that x is equal to negative 1/2. And so if x is negative 1/2, then b is 0, and therefore the entire product is 0. So these are the two answers for that last one there. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the comments, and we'll see you for the next one.